hold on. I need to scream in my pillow. Hey guys, so there's a lot to unpack in this video. Overall, good news. I think towards the end, like I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer. There's just a lot of information to unpack. Overall, I just want to say I'm really happy with this. I'm really glad the developers are going to try 6v6 and a couple other formats too. It's going to be really interesting to see, and I want to give them big props for coming out to this. I just kind of had to end my stream because there's so much going on. I wasn't really sure how to process everything, so I don't want people to sit here and think that I'm like really upset or anything. I'm actually really, really happy now that I've had time to like really look at it and process it all. So, hey, great job, Aaron. Thank you for being honest, and I hope you guys enjoy this reaction. This was just kind of like my raw emotion at the time, and I wasn't really sure how to think about it. But, you know, thinking about it, they've made all the right steps, and it deserves a lot of props. So, hat tip. Thank you, Aaron. Appreciate it. Much love. Take care, guys. Enjoy the video. All right, boys. It's time for this dev vlog. Let's take a look here. So let me just say this to start. My expectations are zero. Their actions really indicate they want to try to stick with 5v5. And so we're going to have now, before I say anything, we're just going to read this and we're going to go through this. I really appreciate Aaron taking the time to put the thought into actually like responding to all this. So let's give this a read. Let's give this a read. Okay. And I'm just going to go through the whole thing and then we'll go back piece by piece and talk about it. Hey everyone, there's been a lot of talk about 6v6 lately. It's only intensified in recent weeks since we've posted our latest director's take and made a Twitter post with the promise to talk about in the future. Well, now's the future, so let's get to the next piece. So let's get into it. Wait, let's not get into it quite yet. This is a pretty complex and nuanced topic, and it gets to the beating heart of what makes this game tick. True. Our players have different opinions and preferences about what the ideal number of players in an Overwatch match, and so does our team. We're a microcosm of a broader community and discuss this internally. I'm hoping that this piece will serve as an introduction to our own discussions and a jumping point to engage off with all of you, which is good. I think this is kind of what needed to happen. I'd also like to set a few expectation and ground rules. First, it's pretty long. Creators are going to lose their voices reading this one out loud. Oh, God. If you'd like a TLDR in the what's next section should suffice. Secondly, I'm not here to tell you what you ought to like or what's empirically better. This is a game, and your preference is for fun to your own taste, ability, and experience. Lastly, there are years of decisions that affect such a fundamental piece of Overwatch. Some of you might be intimately aware of these, while others might not. Before diving in, I'd like to set the stage and give some context about the larger changes to the game that ultimately culminated in the 5v5 format we have today. All right. Now, I'm very curious what they're going to say about this historical section. I am going to do a little bit of like, you know, analysis on whether or not some of the facts are wrong or not. So let's get right into it. There have been 3 large format changes coming to Overwatch. And the first one happened shortly after the game launch. This was hero limits. Before this, there could be any number of particular hero on one team. I'm not even gonna talk about this part because like ultimately like this doesn't matter, you know? We can just skip this really. Let's see. We're gonna skip this whole section just to be honest with you because this is just them this is just them talking about like no hero limits, which is just like don't skip it. Why would I not skip it? This is just going to be them talking about 6 divas stalling on point or 6 immortality fields. Nobody has asked for this, right? So, like, you know, this is just kind of irrelevant history for what we need to talk about today. So, yeah, this is just them talking about 6 MOs, whatever, blah, blah, blah. The second, this is the one that's important right here. This one right here. This one doesn't matter. The second large change of the game's format was the move from open queue to role queue, which limited team compositions to 2 heroes from each role. Before role queue, there was no enforced 2-2-2 in team composition, and players had the freedom to select any role they liked once they loaded into a match. With open queue, teams had a lot of freedom of choice about what heroes and team composition to play, but there were quite a few problems that role queue intended to address. Prior to implementing role queue, there was a stark imbalance of the number of people playing each role within each match. Damage was by far, and still is today, the most popular role, and tank was by far the least popular. In fact, seeing matches with 5 or even 6 damage players on each team was not uncommon. Classic. The role imbalance frequently led to wildly imbalanced matches between teams. The game played better when heroes from all 3 roles were selected. That's true. The disparity caused social issues as players would try to pressure others into playing tank or support roles, even if they didn't want to. It made balancing heroes more difficult since we couldn't balance around a certain role ratio for each team, and it made introducing more heroes more really interesting. I don't know if it would make introducing heroes more difficult. I'm not sure if that's true, but since any new hero kit had to take into consideration hundreds of different team compositions and abilities that it could overlap with, the move to role queue format was aimed to mitigate these challenges. Okay, I guess I see what he's saying there. That is pretty true. But that being said, like, I don't think it's that difficult to understand why a hero like Brigitte would be broken in open queue. I don't think it's that difficult to understand why a hero like Moira could cause problems. Like, ultimately, the main reason the same types of heroes continue to cause problems is because Team 4 at the time didn't understand what they were creating, and they just frankly didn't know the game well enough. Like, I'll just be blunt. And you can, and history would prove that accurate when you look at how many times they tried to change and nerf Brigitte to not get it right. You know, so it's like, yes, it's harder, but like, to be honest, you guys just didn't do a good job. And I'm not saying that's the only reason they went from open queue to roll queue. That's not what I'm saying. That's really, really important to note. But it's also important to note that, you know, some of the failures of open queue were by hero design and just, frankly, an inept design team, just to be frank. We'll see, though. We'll see. Let's see. Moving to roll queue solved many of these problems and added additional benefits to the game as well. With roll queue in place, matchmaking is based on skill within a given role, not just skill overall. That is true. Some players have widely different skill ratings per role. Very true, especially support players being diamond on every other role. Just kidding. Not kidding. Whatever. Sorry about that. So the ability to matchmake around set roles provides a big measurable boost in match quality. Roll queue also solidified the identity of each role, and the fantasy of doing that role's job became clearer. Sure. Maybe. Perhaps. However, the switch to roll queue system did have some downsides. The largest of which was much longer queue times. Prior to roll queue, the matchmaker just needed to find 12 players of similar skill levels in order to put matches together. After roll queue, it needed 4 players of each role to make a match. The total number of players queuing has no effect on this. It's almost solely governed by the ratio, and this is true. This is something that people mess up where they say, oh, the game's free to play, the queue times will be better. The queue times are based on ratio in roll lock. They're not based on the number of players queuing. Like, say you have 100 million players, and 90 million of them are queuing DPS, and like 5 million are queuing support, and 5 million are queuing tank, right? Like, that queue time is still going to be really, really skewed because, again, it's about the ratio of players queuing, which is important to note. So let's see, where was I? It almost solely governed by the ratio of people queuing for the least popular role. That is true. This has happened for multiple roles as well. Given the game's lower relative ratio of players queuing for tank than other damage and support roles, queue times went way up. We'll go into details on this later. The team tried to address this imbalance in various ways. We introduced a priority pass system that gave players who played low demand roles tank a shorter queue time than they switched to damage. This had a positive effect for several weeks, but its influence quickly faded. Unlucky. We also introduced systems to reward players for playing tank, eventually give them like loot box and a bunch of XP for queuing that role. None of those were able to put a dent in the demand for playing DPS. Well, that was because, again, at that time, tank was miserable to play because you guys never properly addressed double shield or any of the rampant CC power creep that you all put in the game. Like, tanks were fun to play. Diva and Zarya were fun to play. The content that there was no new fun content in the tank role that actually appealed to a lot of people. Like, you know, and I will give them credit, like Doomfist rework, Queen. If heroes like that were introduced into 6v6 and they actually offered a fun experience that wasn't forcing double shield with constant immortalities and spam from stuns on overkitted heroes like Orisa and Sigma, tank would have been a lot more fun. So yes, not many people were queuing tank, but as we've shown with roll lock, it's really easy to have any of the roles become very unfun and have no one play them. In Season 7 of Overwatch 2, DPS queue times were instant in high-level play. And again, that's high-level play, to be fair, but it really does show a reflection of what's going on. Because no one wanted to play the role because healing and tank were so strong you couldn't get a kill, which is why we had to do the big changes to Season 9 with the new DPS passive being way better than the old one. So this has happened between each roles, but it is important to note they never sat down and actually tried to make tank fun in 6v6. Not once. They never addressed the core problems of the game, which, to be fair, in Overwatch 2, they did. They had just abandoned that game. Like, they removed Brig Stun. They changed Cass's Hinder. They did a ton of stuff that would have made tank way more enjoyable in Overwatch 1, including introducing a ton of new characters that could have come out and shaken up the meta and made the role more enticing. Now, would that have made tank queue times be the same as DPS? Probably not, but you don't need tank queue times to be the exact same as DPS for 6v6 roll lock to actually work. And the question is, you know, we'll get into some more deeper discussion later, but this was never even attempted. And so it is important to put a little asterisk there and say, while that is true, they never actually attempted to make the experience more fun because they had left that game to go make the new one that wasn't really a sequel. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. The team tried to address this imbalance very... Oh, yeah, we already got to this. Damage queue times drifted a bit lower over time, but much of this was due to the introduction of open queue competitive and the permanent loss of damage players unwilling to wait that long for a match. and this is where the conversation gets really interesting, and I'll talk about this in Marvel Rivals at the end of this because it's all important, is we're going to have a really cool like study, I guess, on game design and game theory in the coming months. It'll be pretty fun to see. There were additional drawbacks with roll queue. I mentioned, and let's actually, by the way, Overwatch doesn't have roll queue. They have roll lock, and that's an important distinction to make. I mentioned earlier that many of our decisions made to improve the game at the cost of match variety and player freedom. Team compositions were now locked at 2-2-2. This was another step in moving into a more consistent experience within Overwatch, but sometimes consistency can start to feel samey. There were pretty exciting metas in the pre-roll queue world, very true, and swapping a hero to a different role mid-match was often a bigger change and more exciting, very true, than swapping to one of the same role. Like hero limits, roll queue took away a part of the freedom in selecting heroes. Yeah, but the roll queue took away a lot more than hero limits did. Like hero limits kind of made sense. Like, and roll queue, like I'm not saying, or roll lock rather, I'm not saying it was a bad decision, but you know, I don't think it's fair to compare those two, to be honest with you, because when you went to 5, well, okay, we'll keep going. Like hero limits, roll queue took away a part of the freedom in selecting heroes that served as a base of Overwatch. But I often wonder if the success of it is as cut and dry as that of hero limits. Could there be an in-between of the version that softens the original problems? And I'm really glad he said this, because I think there could be. And also isn't quite as restrictive as our current roll queue system. A bit more on that later. I love where he's going with this. Because to be fair to the devs, the problems that 5v5 roll lock has introduced would not be the same in 5v5 roll queue in open queue. They would not be the same. The big issue, like if you're going to do roll lock, it is imperative that you do 2 of each role, or else heroes will lose their identities. It becomes lopsided to try to balance, and you don't struggle with the queue times as much. And this is a very, very interesting part. I'm really, really glad and optimistic that he said this. This is really, really interesting. And I'm glad that he's aware of this, because this actually could go a very long way. And I would love to see a discussion about this. I would love to see that. And because this could solve their problems. This could solve their problems, because if you think about it, think about this for a second. If their concern is about having too many designs like overlapping in open queue and becoming OP, in 5v5, it could, and I'm not sure. I'm not saying it's better because I haven't played it. I haven't thought about it too much. There's less stuff that could lap on top of each other, particularly in the support role, which is what caused things to break enormously in the first game. But you get better queue times, and the single role problem in role lock, whether it be tank or support, if you force one role, the counter swapping to that's always going to be good. You have to overtune that role. You don't have to do that. So you can capture what 6v6 did well in that there's less power creep, more time, like easier time to kill on targets. The duels matter way more because, again, everybody has lower health and everybody can make a play on each other. So I am curious. I think if they're going to stick in 5v5, this is the direction they should go. They can't, like, 5v5 roll lock will be bad no matter what you do. 5v5, like, roll queue, not roll lock, actually could have some merit. So we'll see. The third major format change, now this is where it gets interesting, and I do want to revisit this later and give him credit for bringing this up, because that is a really interesting thought, and I'm really, guys, you need to praise them for this paragraph right here, because this is really important. The third major format change. These challenges, as well as longer queue times, led us to the third and most recent format change to the game, from shift from 6v6 to 5v5. This is almost a blog within a blog, but we're going to cover 3 things. Why we switched to 5v5, queue times after the switch to 5v5, what the team thinks about 6v6. Here we go. There are many reasons behind the transition to 5v5. When we launched Overwatch 2, we talked about the greater individual agency that players could have in 5v5. Overwatch is a team sport, which is ironically has aged like milk, by the way. You actually have less individual impact in this game because your gameplay loop is way more set in stone because they removed options from your decision-making process, which is ironic, but that's what happens. Sometimes you make a hypothesis and you're wrong, and that's just science. You know, it is what it is. That's okay. It happens. This was even more of the case previously, and the game could be frustrating if your team was out of sync. Many times, fights in 6v6 couldn't resolve until ultimate abilities came online. Ironically, that's more so what happens now. Correct that. Until ultimate combos could be executed to break through 2 tanks worth of mitigation supported by high uncontested healing output. Ironically, the only tanks you couldn't bust through were Orisa and Sigma. Those were the only 2 tanks that you couldn't bust through, and those were design problems. So they were very easy to bust through otherwise, and ironically, the only times you couldn't hard bust through Orisa and Sigma were when you were playing Map and Brig behind them. So again, those were simply balance issues that could have been addressed in one patch. Literally one patch, and the 6v6 code that's live right now proves that. And actually, ironically, frontlines die more in 6v6 in the code right now than they do in 5v5. So this is just, again, let's big asterisk on this paragraph. The world of 6v6 could have really high highs but really low lows. One of the design goals of 5v5 was to try to raise that floor, even though at the expense of some of those high moments. I mean, again, the only way they get to really low lows is if you all don't design your game well. It's really not that difficult, and this community patch really proves that. And anybody can go. Listen, there's public matchmaking right now in the 6v6 Discord. You can go and queue it up right now. It does it all for you. You can get a game going, and you can learn really, really quickly that a lot of this stuff, like, really just is not true when the game is designed well. October of 2020 proved that when they actually nerfed sustain. So again, it's like it had really low lows, but you guys caused the really low lows. It wasn't the format. It was your design. That was the problem. So big asterisk there, but I understand this goal. And I understand why on paper you would think that's true 100%. And we'll come back to this later. Like on paper, when you're just talking about it at first, that could make sense. And you do have to wait and see what has to happen. Overwatch 2 also has a greater emphasis on FPS gameplay. We'll come back to this too. There's less damage mitigation in CC. Less damage mitigation? Whoa, that's not true. That's just not true at all. We'll come back to this. And players get to shoot at enemies more, but you can't kill them more. Crowd control can take players out of the game for an extended period of time. The CC that we've added back to the game, by the way. Especially when they were chained back to back. A 5-second somber hack, design issue. May freeze, out of the game. Brig Bash, out of the game, except for her ult. Honestly, Giga nerfed in Overwatch 2. All design issues, not format issues. Orisa Halt and Sigma Rock could all happen consecutively to one player. Typically, a tank who could often survive this onslaught, at least in the game, and their real-life mental health was another story. Okay, you just listed abilities on characters that have nothing to do with the format. Those were all things that did get reworked, that could be reworked regardless of the format. And now, since you've added them all back, and made the tanks even more super tanks where you have to shoot them to contest the objective, it is more consistent that those CC and abilities get dumped onto one super tank, in which case it's the only way that you can actually make a play on them. So all of these things that you listed have become worse in this format. Instead of actually trying to treat the arm that you broke, you chose to amputate it. And this is a lot of this is not true. Overwatch 2 does not have a greater FPS emphasis. It doesn't. You took away the options on players that you could kill. It's more of a MOBA now because you have to chain abilities into half these heroes to get kills. There's more damage mitigation in this game right now. BAP shift and I could go down the list of support abilities that are all significantly better at their floor. BAP shift, burst healing, Alari Pylon. Diva Matrix is stronger. Armor is stronger. Every tank ability that mitigates is stronger. And if you go play 6v6, everything dies faster. Everything. There's an additional duel on the map, way more decision-making involved that you as a player have to make a decision on, and the things you shoot die. Not to mention, half of these heroes that were FPS characters have lost their identity in the DPS role. Hanzo has lost his. Junkrat can't combo. Though I guess he's a little bit hybrid of an FPS character. So, like, I don't understand how all of this stuff is in the game now. And again, this might be their original line of thinking. So, like, to be fair to him, like, they could be talking about this way back in the day. But where we're at right now, Overwatch 2 is not more of an FPS than Overwatch 1. And if you go play the 6v6 code, you can feel it. I get less ult charge for every tank. My headshots do less damage to every tank. I think the one really good thing they added to 5v5 was the global healing passive. And I wonder, Aaron, question for you if you do end up seeing this. I wonder if open queue or the role queue thing that you talked about is way more doable with that global health regen passive. That'd be really interesting to see. And I really, really hope that you guys talk about that kind of idea internally. And I'll get to that why later. I know I've said that a couple times. But yeah, no, Overwatch 2 is not more of an FPS. You can't, like, you took away a ton of options. The tanks are not killable. You're forced to only really duel the DPS to start the fight. Sometimes you can kill a support, but all of their abilities are stronger. The mitigation is higher in this game than it was in the previous game, just from a raw number standpoint. And you can feel it in your duels. So let's keep moving. Damage heroes often claim their role was the least impactful relative to the strength of the super powerful tank synergies, and support heroes undoing their playmaking. The emphasis on ability cooldown, management, ult tracking, and shooting barriers instead of players, and not big enough timing windows to just shoot enemies and get eliminations were all factors that contributed to this feeling. To be honest, it was only 4 characters. Baptiste, Brigitte, Orisa, and Sigma. All of which October of 2020 proved could be fixed in one patch. And when those heroes were meta, you saw eliminations per 10, at least at high-level play, go down by 30% per 10 minutes. It was very common throughout all of 6v6's life, and they have this data they can go see, where elims per 10 were sitting around like 25 for DPS in 6v6. Even in GOATS meta. If you were popping off, you could get 30. But very rarely they'd be between like 23 to like 26 consistently in top 500. Sometimes when you're popping off on a season, you can have 30. The second they went to double shield, with all those heroes stacking, it dropped to 17 for multiple seasons. The limbs per 10 went way down. That's not a format issue. That is strictly design. You all threw these broken heroes in the game for years and never addressed them properly. That is not format, just to be clear. And now you have games where you are shooting an immortal Roadhog, which, by the way, in order for tanks to become oppressive, they had to execute and synergize together. I don't even think they were that oppressive outside of Orisa Sigma, to be honest with you, which were design issues again. They had to actually execute. So what has happened in this game? In order to try to make solo tanking fun, they've now given all these tanks all of that power of sustain passively with no execution requirement. It's worse now. It is worse now. Divas are flying into entire teams and have zero punishability for their entire flight cooldown, and it instantly comes back and they just fly out. If a Diva was to make that play in 6v6, which again, you can go see in the 6v6 code, when they had less health, more options for themselves, way more thought-provoking engages in duels on any target on the map they could choose to go on based on how the players make decisions. It is easier to make the play on that Diva then, even if she has a monkey with her, because they, like, even though they're stacked on top of each other, they both have windows of vulnerability inside that you can make a play on. There is no window of vulnerability now in 5v5 because of how much they've had to buff tanks to make the role remotely enjoyable for anybody. So, you know, it's just not, like, they're more oppressive now in every engage. So, and that's just something that we have to note. Support heroes also had to focus almost exclusively on healing, since there were bigger team health pools. I don't know if that's true anymore, but and more incoming damage on the field with the additional tank player. In 5v5, they have more agency to add some damage or duel other heroes. That's just not true. Like, there were tons of time that you could do damage in 6v6 as a support. I don't think that that's accurate. Like, and as well as the fact, at least playing Kiri in 6v6, there was way more thought and decision. She's actually very balanced in 6v6 because she has single target healing and she can still have her 2-tap. So, like, playing Kiri in 6v6 feels awesome, and I'm dueling all the time. All the time I'm dueling. All the time I'm dueling. And also, the sleep darts I hit as Ana on a tank mattered. Like, if I slept and naded a Reinhardt, he would die a lot. Especially a Hog, he would die a lot.
Greetings.
Like, even as support, you had more playmaking in 6v6. You just did. Because there wasn't a raid boss tank in front of you. It was 2 weaker ones. And after playing the 6v6 code, I will quadruple down on this. So I don't think that any of these claims are actually accurate. Especially with where, maybe in the original alpha, before they had to power creep support a ton to make the role fun in 5v5 because they were dying 10 deaths per 10 in the betas. But to say that supports had to focus exclusively on healing, that's just not true. Supports have to heal dump into the solo tank more now than they did with 2 tanks previously. And the difference is there was a lot more decision making that went into it previously than there is now. The game's on autopilot. So I understand, like, these might be the claims again from a couple years ago, but they haven't aged well. Like, on paper, this is all interesting ideas, but they just didn't age like we're claiming, you know? There's a mosquito on my face. Apologies. Let's see. Oh, my gosh. Okay. Tank synergy wasn't always fun. It slowed the game down and stabilized it. but sometimes it absolutely ground it to a halt. The only time it slowed the game down was double shield. And right now, the stalemate between two raid boss tanks slow the game down even more than two weaker tanks that you could playmake on. I had a fight go on for 3 minutes of a Hog and Sig just shooting at each other. And I get it, it wasn't always fun. I'm not saying it was always fun, but it was more fun when it was on the players to actually make something happen in a game that's, you claim that Overwatch 2 is about execution and an FPS. An FPS game is about execution. You've removed almost all the execution from the role, or you know what, I don't want to say removed it all. You've drastically reduced it and given it to everyone passively. That's not execution. And so if something's going to be oppressive, you should have to execute. But there's so many passive abilities now that you could remove from 5v5, and I would love to see it go away from that, but I think we're just going to end up with the same problems of people complaining about the role, which I'm going to get to later. I'll finish the paragraph. People point to double shield meta as an example of this. It wasn't just about double shields, though. The ability to stack a very defensive-heavy lineup, especially in a game modes that required a team to push through a small choke. Okay, 2CP's gone. Caused a lot of matches to feel like there was no progress at all. The game is faster now, and it doesn't typically stall out. It feels like there is more room to move around the map without the need to earn every inch of it. In 5v5, fights are often less focused on moving around in a death ball formation, and there's more room to take angles, flank, and duel other players, which brings in more of that FPS gameplay. I mean, I don't even know where to start with this. That's just not true. Like, okay, let's go piece by piece here. Okay. So, people point to double shield as an example of this. It wasn't just about double shields, though. The ability to stack a heavy defense lineup, especially in game modes that required a team to push through small chokes, caused a lot of matches to feel like there was no progress at all. Like what? What defense-heavy lineup was there besides
We need
double
to
shield?
boycott. Stop playing and buying anything Blizzard-related. Hit the pockets and bottom line. It's the only way they learn FFS.
Like what specifically? Give me one specific that was not double shield of an iteration of bunker comp that made the game slow to a crawl. Because we can pull up the VODs before Sigma and Bap and Brig, and what were people playing on 2CP into bunker? Dive. The most fast-paced comp in the game. People played dive. I understand that some defensive comps, like, sometimes beat out dive, like Torbjorn on Hanamura, but 2CP is gone. That was the most slow bunker. That was the only format, or map format, and get your game type, that you could stall out a defensive-heavy point. That was the only one. And how 6v6 is playing right now, it is less of a stalemate than 5v5. Because again, every ability and health pool is significantly weaker. So that's fine that you give people more access to space. But in 6v6, when it was not double shield, as this code is proving, right now, on the live game, which I highly encourage you to go play, Aaron. I highly encourage you to just go play it and try it. Have fun with it. It's a fun code. It's a fun code. It really is fun. Because there's a lot of things that we can learn from that code that would benefit both formats, okay? The game actually felt faster, especially as a tank player, when there was an exchange and a dance, okay? When tank heroes were exchanging their cooldowns, it felt faster paced because there were a ton of different micro things you could do in the exchange to gain an advantage. There were more decisions, more options, weaker health pools, weaker abilities, and lower time to kills on every tank matchup. This sped the game up. It did not slow it down. I don't know who is telling you this, but they do not know Overwatch. They do not know the game. Whoever is telling you this does not have a clue what they are talking about. Nobody. Nobody. Anybody who is telling you this has no clue what they're talking about. I'm okay with people having opinions, but when they cite facts incorrectly, that's where there's going to be a problem, and that's where you guys are going to get a little bit stuck. That is not true. Tank synergy sped the game up. It did not slow them down, and they were less oppressive then than a solo tank with giga stats and no execution requirement to get that sustain now, when every support and every DPS could make a play on those tanks because their health pools were all weaker. And if you don't believe me, go play the 6v6 code today. Insanity. So I can understand some of these small chokes, especially on 2CP. I can understand that, especially in the double shield metas, which was most of 6v6 role queue, unfortunately. And games feel more stalled out now than they did before. I don't know how to say that. It's insane. Because again, that tank just won't die. You can't duel them unless you go around them. And now, by the way, are we going to act like that there aren't moments on this game, even in 5v5, where you have no option but to shoot the tank to get through a choke or do something? That's still there. There's more window of opportunity to break through that choke when the tanks are both weaker. So you want to talk about opportunity in FPS games, 6v6, where the stats are all weaker, which you could make the stats weaker in 5v5, but you guys have not done that. Wow, okay. And you know how you know this, guys? Aaron, I ask you to look at the amount of damage per 10 done per elimination on average across a set amount of games. You're going to see the amount of damage done per elimination in 5v5 right now is significantly more than what it was in 6v6. I bet you anything, especially at high-level play. Because there are so many more times where you're just dumping into an unkillable tank trying to make something happen until somebody else shoots somewhere else. I would love to see that stat. They'll never publish it, but again, I know a lot of this won't ever come out to the public, but just internally, I challenge you guys to look at this before this is too late and you guys have realized you've dumbed down your game and took away what's special about it. Okay. While 6v6 can have high moments, it's also hard to follow. Tracking 9 other players is easier than 11. There are fewer visual effects on screen, especially during big team fights. Overwatch is a pretty demanding game, and moving to 5v5 made it a bit more cognitively manageable. Lastly, one of the big benefits of 5v5 was dramatically reduced queue times. Let's explore that. You know, chess is hard to follow, so let's just make chess checkers. You know, what made Overwatch special was that it was chess. There were a ton of different ways for players to explore the game. And something that Frito has argued to me that I think he's completely wrong about consistently is he said it's a high-level thing. You don't have to be a grandmaster player to understand and explore chess compared to checkers. You could be, like, what's fun about that and what made the game fun was the player's ability to explore. And Marvel Rivals has really shown this, where it is 6v6 open queue. But I feel like there's a ton of different ways that I can go on the journey myself and explore their identity, how to play them, a lot of options. And if in an FPS game, your answer is to make a single raid boss tank, your options become dramatically reduced, especially when the supports get better as well. So, you know, that exploration aspect, like, you know, you say that it's hard to follow and it's easier to track. Are we really going to act like kids in average ranks are good enough, any of them, to sit there and have to track things? Or what that makes, if that's what makes things fun? They never do that. They never do that. They don't need to do that. But the idea of the exploration and a lot of things going on around them is a part of what made Overwatch feel really, really special. So I don't think a lot of this stuff, I get it. It's easier to follow, but I'm going to tell you a story, Aaron. And this is when I was a kid a long time ago. When I first joined Mindplex as a kid, you know, which is the company I own now, I guess, in the Minecraft space. You know, we had a game a lot like Overwatch. It was called Mindplex Champions. And I played this server when it had like maybe a couple hundred players. And Mindplex ended up going on to be the biggest network in the world at its time. And when we first merged with Mindplex to create Mindplex, Better MC and Mindplex Castle Assault to become Mindplex, they took Champions where you had 5 different kits: Assassin, Brute, Mage, Knight, and Ranger. And you could put 12 skill points into a ton of different skills total. In order to make the games easier to understand, because we thought it was overwhelming, they decided to remove the ability to have each unique skill have multiple levels to it. So like, for example, Evade, an assassin skill, could go up to level 5, right? And instead, it became level 1. And we thought at the time, hey, we're making the game easier. It's going to be better for people to understand. But we couldn't have been more wrong. And what ended up happening is it made everyone quit because we removed what made the game special. And we learned that Champions was a steakhouse. It wasn't McDonald's. It wasn't meant for a wide audience. And by trying to make it more accessible, we accidentally ruined what made it special. And that was like a real eye-opener for me. I was only like a 17-year-old kid, 18-year-old, 17-year-old. I think I was a 17-year-old kid at the time. And it really mind-fucked me because I was like, holy shit, like I thought that this was going to make the game better, but it actually did the opposite. And it watered down the game, and it removed exactly the customization and the options and what made things special, what made it stand out, what made Overwatch win Game of the Year was that exploration and unique hero identity. And what's ended up happening in 5v5 is a lot of that identity has just been watered down or removed. The gameplay options just simply aren't there as much. And I understand that you might think it this way, but I'm telling you that story not because I'm saying like we're always right, we're always this, but like that was a real eye-opening experience for me where like I couldn't comprehend that actually would be like what happened. And it was the first real ego check that I got. And again, I wasn't designing the game at the time, but I was super into it, like with design docs and stuff, and I thought it was really, really fun. Because game design is fun, and that's where I do sympathize with you here, because I know it's very heated, and I hope people are very polite throughout this whole thing. But it's not worth removing what made the game special. It's not. And we learned that lesson, and we changed it back, and then Champions blew up in popularity. It blew up in popularity. It was awesome, and it's still around today. Clan servers are still going today, and we're hopefully going to be releasing them soon. So don't fall for the bait here and thinking that you're doing something good by making the game easier to follow by removing what made it special at the same time with the dynamic and player agency. That's all I'll say about that one. I'm sure that they've probably considered that, but just some thought, I suppose. All right, let's talk queue times. All right, here we go. The chart below shows rank play queue times per role after the introduction of role lock in Overwatch 2019. Compared to the queue times per role in Overwatch 2's 5v5 role queue format, as you can see, the shift to 5v5 role queue dramatically reduced queue times for players in all roles, and most notably the damage role, which is the most popular one. All right, let's see. Overwatch 6v6 post role queue, Overwatch 2 5v5 lifetime. Interesting. Overwatch 6v6 post role queue, Overwatch 2 5v5 lifetime. Wait. Oh, that's okay. That's support. Okay. Overwatch 6v6 post role queue, Overwatch 2 5v5 lifetime. Okay. So, let's see. I need to read this graph. Give me a second. What are these? Minute time in minutes, 7.6. 2.9 is now. Support was 2.8. Now, Overwatch 2, it's 1.4. Now, 6v6 post-roll queue is 1.8. And Overwatch 2, 5v5 lifetime, 1.3. I'm curious how these have aged, because these are the average throughout time. What I think is going to be happening is with less and less people enjoying tank over time, if this number, I think it has to go up, has been if tank players are stopping playing the role. If tank players are stopping playing the role, would that make that go up or down? Would this go down? I'm confused. Or no, these would go up. I'm trying to help me math here, chat. Down? Okay. Interesting. So it has gone down, but all of them have gone down as well. Though particularly, this was the blocker for all of these. Interesting. The biggest factor driving the difference between Overwatch and Overwatch 2 queue times is the ratio of players queuing between each role. And people get this wrong all the time, yeah. We hear people explaining that long queue times are a result of not enough people playing Overwatch, but that's not what it is. It's relative to other roles. Players generally queue tank less, leading to longer wait times for all while we wait for tank to free up and find a proper match. So in practice, the actual ratio of players queuing per tank, damage, and support is much closer to the current 1-2-2 format than the previous 2-2-2 format. As a result, the 5v5 role queue format better mirrors the actual player interest in each role, and making the switch resulted in shorter queues. Yes, you reduce the queues, but you also reduce the quality of playing the other roles, including tank. And you can see that in a lot of the hero identities that have gone away. A lot of the options that you actually have on the map. So it came at the cost of quality. The sharp drop-off in queue times in October 2022 is when Overwatch 2, along with 5v5, shipped. The queue times, and I'm not sure, when was this graph taken? Is this collectively over time, or like where is it now is an interesting question too. The sharp drop-off in queue times in October 2022 is when Overwatch 2, along with 5v5, shipped. The queue times of all heroes dropped and now are much shorter than they were in the 6v6 world. This is almost all because the game required one less tank in a match. If you look at the current queue times, you can see that there's still a lack of tanks compared to other roles. Just flipping the switch return to 6v6 would likely cause a return to previous queue times or worse. Okay, so I don't think it's fair to say that it's only because of dropping one of the tanks. You guys introduced 2 new tank heroes plus a rework at launch. Some things that have gone a lot, like Doomfist has a very dedicated community. Very dedicated community. People love playing Doomfist. The Doom mains, they're going to get mad for me saying this. They're going to get really mad for me saying this, but it's true. The Doomfist players are like the Mercy players of tank. I'll say it. They might get mad about that. I'll say it. The Doom players are like the Mercy players of tank, dude. These kids will pick fucking Doomfist in any situation, anywhere, anytime. It doesn't matter. They're fisting on, okay? And we know that's true. You guys can act like that's not true, but we all know that you guys are fucking fist on, man. I watched you guys play Doomfist in the Malga meta. We all know that's gonna happen. Now, is that gonna single-handedly make more people queue tank compared to the other roles? No, but it is important to note. They did a couple reworks, introduced new characters that had not been introduced since 2019, really. And a lot of these new tank heroes are actually, to give them credit, better designed than a lot of the ones that happened in Overwatch 1. There was a lot more, there was more on the rack, if you will. There was a bigger selection, you know, there was more options, and those options made the game fun. The options for tanking in 6v6 towards the end were really, really boring. They released 3 tank heroes that generally weren't received well, though. I guess I'll count Ball as kind of his own little niche. But they didn't make tanks that actually tried to attract the DPS type players like Junker Queen, who is a brilliant hero. Seriously. Even Ramakshra now, I think would be really cool in 6v6. He played awesome in 6v6. So did Malga. So would it make it perfect? No. But to sit here and say that I think, where was this line? Where was this line? The biggest factor for Overwatch, where was this? This is almost all because the game required 1 less tank in a match. It helped, but there are things that you can do to improve queue times outside of removing a player. Roll strength, again, made DPS queue times go down to instant because support became so strong, everybody was queuing support. Roll strength is a thing. Content is a thing as well. New tank heroes, but you can't do that consistently. That's also, you know, you're not gonna be able to do that all the time. So I will give him the flowers on that. Obviously, if you cut off a player, I just don't think it's worth the quality dip that you're seeing for everything else, because you've removed what makes the game special. With competition coming, we're gonna talk about this more now. And to cycle back to the very beginning of this is why the conversation about, I wonder if a hybrid between role queue or role lock and open queue could exist. Because then you can maintain the hero identities. You can try out 5v5 in a much more interesting way with a lot of depth. And I'm really curious if that could work, because then you don't have a lot of the game's problems right now are specifically because of the role lock format in 5v5. If there was some kind of role lock and role queue hybrid, or open queue hybrid rather, that made role queue in an open queue format, a lot of the pain points that they've had to try to fix could go away. It's an interesting conversation, and that's where a lot of this ties back in. Thoughts on 6v6. The game started its life with 6 players on each team. I discussed why we moved away from 6v6, but that doesn't mean it's without any merit. There are moments of madness that could happen with 12 players in a max. It just didn't quite, that just don't quite, coalesce when there are 10. Excuse me. It was almost too much to keep track of. Correction. It was too much to keep track of at times, but that was part of the charm. I don't know about that. I wouldn't say it was too much. Most people just kind of like going around and doing shit. There are big moments in Overwatch 2, but they don't quite have that same chaotic, over-the-top feeling to them. Very true. Part of that chaos allowed players to feel less pressure in a match. There was an extra player to take up a bit of the slack for someone that was performing poorly, and since that player was a tank, they had quite a bit of impact. There were a lot more hit points and defensive capabilities to burn, though, which had a stabilizing effect on gameplay. Teams would fold a bit slower than they do now. Maybe in average ranks where players just don't use abilities right, but there were more little micro fights happening across the map in 6v6. And so when you get one kill, the fight's not just over. So he is right in that. But that's also a good thing, because it made fights more turnable. And it made the game more fun and have way more depth. We'll see. I'm trying to think about how to word that because it is important to be specific about what exactly, the point is. We went over some of the issues of tank synergy earlier, but having two of them allowed one to focus on protecting the backline while the other held ground and pushed into the enemy team. The tank role had a lot more depth in understanding how to work with the other tank on the team. Part of the mastery curve took a long time to learn, and a small group of people devoted to it, that was a part of its allure. And for the small group of people, see, I wouldn't even say it's about the small group of people. You were just way more dynamic. You had way more options. You had way more freedom to choose to do what you wanted. There was way more decision making. You were more vulnerable. The other team was more vulnerable. The game just felt better for a lot of people in each role. You have to prefer your thoughts within my rank. Whatever you think about the game, it never happens in gold. That's not really true. That's not really true at all. See, again, that's just not, I disagree. That's just not true. Right? I mean, people weren't using abilities right. That doesn't mean a lot of the same things weren't happening. The level of execution was different. But again, like, for example, people in high ranks flanked on ball all the time. You would flank on ball and go in and dive. Gold players would also have the option to go flank on ball. They just would do it like a gold player instead of like a GM player who could pile drive and set up the combos. But they still were able to experience and go through that gameplay loop of having those decisions granted there for them. That's like saying, again, I don't have to say, quote, in my rank, because you don't have to be a grandmaster player to enjoy chess. There's a ton of different ranks in chess, but going through the journey of playing the game on your own and the loop of the game happens to everybody. It's just the execution is actually different the higher up you go. That doesn't mean that you can't enjoy those options as an average player. And that's something a lot of the 5v5 camp and people arguing for that, like Frito and Jake, have said consistently in their debates towards guys like me and Hawk. But that's not actually true. It's not just a high rank thing. It's not only high level players that enjoy these things. You don't have to be a good player to sit down and really, really enjoy it, about what makes it fun. Because games are about fun. And when you have more options, there are more things in your control. That makes a game fun. It's like a roller coaster that rides in a straight line. Do you want to go on the roller coaster that rides in a straight line or has very little curves and twists, or do you want to do the fucking crazy one? Most people will probably want to do the crazy one. Because again, if you're going to an amusement park, what's your target audience? People who probably like roller coasters, who probably like to ride the crazy rides. And that's what Overwatch is. It's a wacky ride. So I don't think that's really a fair argument. But let's keep going here. We went over some of the issues of tank synergy earlier, but having two of them allowed one to focus on. Oh, okay, we already went over that. We mentioned the difficulty in balancing tanks for 6v6 earlier, but the past year and a half has shown us that there are issues with balancing tanks for 5v5 as well. For much of Overwatch 2, tanks have been fairly balanced, but one of them becomes a powerful outlier like Malga that can be felt strongly in this world of one tank. Yes, it is, and I'm glad they can admit this. It is significantly harder to design and balance tank heroes in 5v5 role lock than in 6v6. It is much harder, and your design options are much more limited into what you have to put on a hero for it to be viable. It is much harder to organically play what you want in 5v5 than it is in 6v6. Much harder. Because when they pick the super tank, as the tanks have had to become super tanks, if your DPS is a bad matchup into that tank, a lot of times you also have to switch to try to punish that tank. For example, when they have ball, I almost have to go Sombra if I want to kill him. Because I won't be able to kill him on any other hero. And previously, when in order to become oppressive in 6v6, which you really weren't that oppressive outside of double shield, the players had to actually execute. Meaning, if the tanks were to become unkillable and match dominant, that only really started to happen the higher up you went in the ranks. But now, because you've given it to these tanks passively, because they have to deal with the pressure of being a solo tank, this now applies the oppressiveness to every rank. Not just the high-level players. It's anti-casual. Not just for the tank player, because they're not having as much fun, and most people will just sit there and say tank diff. But also to the rest of the lobby, who will sit there and not be able to kill that tank player who want that response. See, we might have been shooting shields a lot in Overwatch 1, but there's no difference in shooting shields compared to immortal players that have insane cooldowns and damage mitigation passively. In fact, I'd rather shoot the shields because there were at least windows of opportunity to kill the players through the shield. And those were design issues. So you removed options. You effectively have the same problem, but it's now passive, and it applies to every player in all ranks. So you've saved queue times, sure, but you've diminished the quality and the depth and what made this game special as well. I don't think that's worth it, personally. And we're going to get to another big thing here in a little bit. What's next? Okay. That was a lot of setup. I think I put more effort into this than any essay I wrote in college. And Aaron, we appreciate that, man. Thank you for... And I hope other people kind of respond to this too. You know, I think this is all people wanted. Really. Just some clarity. So I can tell you that, you know, I think people are opinionated, but at least the 6v6 code is there, so we can still hop on Overwatch and play it. But we do appreciate you taking the time to write this up, man. Okay, that was a lot of setup. I think I put more effort into this than any essay I wrote in college. So where do we go from here? At the end of the day, we want to make this game that players want to play. Because of challenges mentioned previously, we were focused on making 5v5 the best experience that it can be. However, because we operate as a service to our players, we remain open-minded to the reevaluating our decisions based on your actions and feedback to give you the best experience we can. Rather than to introduce a disruptive permanent change to the game, we prefer to explore the space further and make changes based on that exploration, which could be interesting. With that said, bold, we're in bold, not bold. Like they're saying this bold. Like it's italicized / bolded, whatever. Okay. We're looking at running a series of events to try out different core team compositions formats in Overwatch 2. The community has just once or twice suggested a test. Why not put various forms of 6v6 in the game to gauge the results? We agree, and based on your feedback, we're exploring how we can at least test different forms of 6v6 to gauge the results. This has taken some time, however, for reasons that may not be readily apparent. That's fine. Again, like 6v6 will come back to Overwatch at some form. Like, and look, I'm okay with some seasons that they want to do 5v5 for a season. They want to do 6v6 for a season. Like shaking up the game isn't necessarily a bad thing. I do think that 6v6 as a format will be better. I would love to see 5v5 kind of roll Q, not roll lock, be attempted. I think it'd be really, really interesting. And so don't be closed-minded on that. Because, again, well, I'll get to it later. I need to get some water. Hold on, chat. I need to go to the bathroom. I need to pee again. Dude, I think I'm getting a little sick. I need to lock in here. Give me a sec, boys. Give me a sec. Because I got to give you my thoughts after this. Hold on. All right, I got my water. I'm sure Aaron was chugging his, too. Oh, my goodness. He did. He wasn't kidding. It's a long one. Okay. All right, let's see. This takes some time. Okay. The first and honestly largest reason is the need to do this in a way that allows the game to have more optimized technical performances. Oh my goodness. I'm referring to frame rate and memory constraints with 12 players in a match. There have been quite a few upgrades and additions to Overwatch that have an impact on the performance of the game. Oh no. These range from new features like allied outlines and enabler healer vision by default. In addition, oh my goodness, the engine. Oh my god, the fucking engine. The addition of more technically demanding hero kits, as well as visual upgrades to UI, heroes, and maps. In a 6v6 setting, these upgrades can have a significant impact for our players, causing the game to underperform on older systems. Overwatch is a fast-paced game, and maintaining a game that runs smoothly across all our platforms is important to player experience. Oh my god. Oh my god. The fucking rumors were true, bro. Overwatch 2, boys. Look, I'm not even going to flame them on this. They were probably rushed to make this game. Oh my fucking god. Oh my fucking god. I'm not going to flame them for it. I feel terrible for them for it. And look, I know people, oh my fucking god. Look, development's hard. Development is hard. They were on a tight deadline from executives that were very clearly taken this shit in the wrong direction. No, the workshop code does have some issues. It does have some issues. No, like you can notice some frame lag. So basically what this means, and this is the truth, and this right here, this is why I think this conversation took so long. I mean, okay. Overwatch is a fast-paced game, and maintaining that runs smoothly across all platforms is important for the player experience. While limited time tests could arrive sooner, the team is investigating how exactly long it would take to permanently increase performance across the game. In other words, the engine was built like shit. In other words, the engine was this new engine was made for the PvE that never came out, okay? 5v5 is easier for performance, and it's just not optimized as well. And so because of that, we now are in a worse PvP format. I mean, Jesus effing Christo.
I need healing.
I bet they started over from scratch, and the new devs straight up couldn't optimize as well as our one devs.
And guys, to be honest, these are the rumors that I heard. I didn't speak on them because there's no confirmation. I don't like that. But this is awful, and I feel bad for them because like look, I'm past the point of casting blame to anybody. I don't want to do that because it's not productive. But holy shit, what a blunder! And this is Kotick trying to make a new game. It is. If we had just kept updating Overwatch 1, this wouldn't be like what does he mean? First of all, range of new features like Allied Outlines. Allied Outlines were already in the game. No? You could see your allies, right? Like, this is an even bigger disaster than, like features got removed from the fucking game. He's saying, hold on. Oh, what's up, Anna? He's saying now it's by default, I think. I mean, this is a sick joke. Just give me back Overwatch 1 then or something. Like, guys, I don't want to get mad at them for this because, like, look, I understand how hard development is. Like, I've learned this with Mindplex too, like, from back when I was a kid and even now. I commend the honesty. We kind of already knew this, but holy fuck, dude. In addition of more technically demanding hero kits. Okay, what hero kits are more technically demanding now than Overwatch 1? What hero kits are more technically demanding now than Overwatch 1? I'm not saying that like, what fucking hero kits? I'm asking that. It's an actual question. Like, what hero kits would be more demanding? RAM? I mean, Simwall was an quote. We lost the technology. These sounds like an excuse DICE made with Battlefield over the years. That's I don't even know if I want to talk about this section. I don't. Okay. Let's just keep going. I'll revisit that later. Holy fuck. So essentially, TLDR, they built a worse game engine for the sequel. Not their fault. They were put on shitty deadlines. It was shitty Activision. I'm not going to blame Team 4 for that. I'm not going to. Fucking Jesus, they built a worse engine. I can't believe this shit for PvE that never came out. I wish you guys luck. Holy fuck, that's terrible. I'm sorry. Good luck, guys. I'm rooting for you. That's quite the hole, and I hope Microsoft gives you the resources to get out of it. But best of luck. Because I know, like, before I move on, the reason why this is so shitty, it's just like you have people that really care about the game, and it just sucks to see that for them. It really does. It just fucking shit. Jesus Christ, fuck. Hold on, I need to fucking scream in my pillow. Okay. Another issue that gives me anxiety about this is opening Pandora's box, is what to do with queue times if enough players prefer 6v6 to keep some form of it around. This team was not able to solve this issue previously. While we have some ideas now, there's no guarantee that they will work. Is there a world where people are willing to live with long queue times to play this format? Maybe. But that's a pretty risky move to make. We also have tens of millions of new players that have only played 5v5. We want to be open-mindedly, not to frustrate those who look into the game as it is today. Okay. And again, this is why, Aaron, like, I think that your original idea, okay, let's just be fucking real for a second. This is a goddamn disaster. This is corporate speak for we fucked up and we built the worst engine. So how can we fucking solve the gameplay issues around this? The only way you guys can solve the limited gameplay loop and hero identity crisis that's been created because of this dog shit ass format is by doing what we talked about previously, Aaron. And what you talked about previously, Aaron, where you said that maybe there's some kind of coexistence between roadblock and open queue. If you are constrained by the game engine, I will say a lot of the limitations and issues that are caused by 5v5 roadblock with tank power creep and tanks being unduelable, support abilities having to be gigabuffed, could all be mitigated if you went to some kind of open queue roadblock hybrid. And if that also happened, your queue times for everybody probably could go down. They'd be reduced a little bit. You can try to make the matches 1-2-2, but giving players the options and flexibility could allow you to nerf a lot of the shit that's been problematic. That's a big can of worms, and going back to open queue is a conversation that I have stayed away from, but it could work. Oh my God. Okay. The outcome of these tests would give us a lot of valuable information to consider moving forward. We'd run the test for a few weeks and gauge interest from the community. Then we measure the impact it had on... Okay. Jesus fucking Christ, man. We take the lessons from this playtest to see what we can learn about the mode within the current game's ecosystem for the future of Overwatch. We would reflect carefully on the learnings from whatever tests we run and explore how to best give players what's being asked for. Whether it's a world of 5v5 or 6v6 or even both, it's a future for us to figure out. I agree. I would not do both at the same time. I'm going to jump on the soapbox for a moment. When you look at the changes to Overwatch since its inception, it's clear that many of those have reduced some of the variety within the Overwatch match. We get feedback from a lot of players that we can feel the same from game to game. While much of this gets attributed to 5v5, we feel that there's more at play here. Like what? Besides running experiments with 6v6, we'd like to run some that re-examine the ways we tried solving previous problems, specifically the goal of bringing the freedom back to Overwatch match without severity of the issues accompanied. For instance, we think there could be other ways of putting a team together that aren't quite as rigid as a set composition, but not as loose as open queue. We'll be running at least one quick play hack based on this idea in Season 13. Interesting. There's some gotchas to this direction, but after reading 400 pages of this blog, I hope you're ready to see that there are trade-offs to many of the decisions that go into it, any game really. Here's the thing, too. People play Overwatch for the heroes, and at least in 5v5 Rolllock, a ton of those heroes have had their expression and identity dumpstered. Spylo mentioned Diva. A lot of the tanks don't have options because their dance is gone. Hanzo can't one-shot anymore. He feels awful to play, and at least I'm playing Hanzo that I know and love back in the previous game. Junkrat can't use his combo, which have made him really responsive and fun. Reaper and Sim have struggled, but you guys have power crept them back really into where they can be kind of pickable. It's just... Oh, the fucking engine, bro. I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry. I can't get past that. Everything about this game is a downgrade. They actually just fucking hard downgraded everything. They fucking hard downgraded everything and called it a sequel. And I'm really not trying to bash the current team for this. And I feel bad for a lot of the new people. But as a fucking 8-year player who I was really, really vocal and look, I'm not trying to get sympathy from anybody. I don't care. Sympathy does not change lives. I don't care. And I'm trying to be sympathetic to them in this situation. But to have a lot of the takes that I did and get vilified by the casual audience for sitting here and just desperately trying to tell people that this shit isn't the fucking answer. To see this be the result and have everything about Armageddon that I was concerned about happen. Holy fuck. It makes me want to headbutt a wall. It makes me want to headbutt a wall. Because at that point, I should have just shut the fuck up and just done what all my other friends did. Like, what was it for, dude? What was it for? I mean, what was it for? Fuck. Your feedback has driven both our inspiration and commitment to the testing new ideas in game. We want to be super thoughtful about how we implement new ideas into the live game because there are millions of players who can jump into Overwatch in each season. And we want... I can't believe this. I cannot believe this, man. I can't fucking believe it. Like, I don't know whether to laugh like the Joker or to just give up. I don't. Like, at this point, I'm like, all right, I'm just going to go to Marvel Rivals, man. Like, it's even worse than we thought. Didn't you get what you wanted? They literally said they're trying 66 genuine questions. I don't understand. I think they're trying a quick play hacked. But my point is, and this has been my point.
I need healing.
Like, the main, like, again, their game currently, the sequel that's supposed to be an upgrade, quite literally cannot handle 6v6, is what he said there. So we've just wasted the game's reputation, 2.5 years on a format that's worse for fucking nothing. And unfortunately, the game's vulnerable now. So it's just like, I don't know. This isn't the last time we're getting to 5 or 6v6. In closing, we appreciate you so much. The team hears you. And Aaron, we appreciate that. So I just need to vent about that for a minute because that's just unreal. Okay. Because the thing is, like, as an Overwatch player, none of us asked for a new game. Nobody. And that statement right there just cements that Overwatch 2 was a failure at every level, not just the PvE. From a performance standpoint, well, the shop got updated. And it just, I feel bad for the team here.
Need healing.
I feel bad for the players.
The issue is the inability to make a game that can handle what I1 could handle. It's a signal. A bad one.
Not a failure, a mistake. There's no failures, only lessons. True. No failures, only lessons. True. Okay. So, all right. Holistically, there's a lot said in this. I think a lot of the points that Aaron brought up about the gameplay loop are inaccurate, and I would highly consider wherever they're getting information about how 6v6 functioned gets reevaluated. Because you don't have more options in 5v5. The gameplay loop is way more one-dimensional because, again, the tanks won't die. In order for a tank to become oppressive in 6v6, they had to execute at a very high level. You don't, like, now, if you give that to a tank at its floor passively, you take out all of the execution, which is what makes an FPS game is executing. And so what you've done is you've drastically reduced the amount of things you actually have to execute on as a player. That's not more of an FPS. Just because you can access space easier doesn't make the game an FPS. What makes a game an FPS is what are your options to execute on and then get direct value from. And 6v6 offered way more to that category. Not to mention, it had way more unique hero identities that were actually powerful and ways to express yourself. For example, Hanzo had a way better identity in Overwatch 1. So did Junkrat. Every tank in the game had way more skill expression and unique ways to play. And what we've learned over the years, and what my big argument would be, and this has been said by many people, players play Overwatch for what, chat? Why do people play Overwatch? The heroes. People play Overwatch for the heroes. And when you have to drastically reduce hero identity, hero design, and gameplay options for these players to actually express themselves, you have made a worse product. That's not Overwatch anymore. Can 5v5 function? Sure, it can function, but it will never be better. It will never be better. Never. We know this at this point. To Aaron and the team, thank you guys for taking the effort to do this. I hope that people don't attack you guys on this. I mean, I know people are frustrated about, especially the engine comment, which just, you know, I think that really is a big deciding factor. You know, I appreciate the effort, man. I do. I feel bad for you guys. I think that you guys probably got put in a really shitty situation. The entirety of Activision Blizzard was a mess, and you guys definitely got caught in a bit of that crossfire when it comes to like holistic updates to like the engine itself, to PvE, and like not getting the team that you guys needed. So I am really sympathetic to you guys for that one. I understand, and you know, best of luck, man. I'm not rooting against you. I hope other people aren't either. It's not GG's. It's not GG's. They can fix it. They can fix it, guys. It's not GG's. It's a damn shame, though.